Homeless girl teaches billionaire's daughter a secret lesson. He can't believe what he sees. The golden sun filtered gently through the treetops, casting dappled patterns across the perfectly manicured lawn of the Whitmore estate. The garden stretched for acres, an oasis of wealth and privilege hidden behind tall iron gates. And yet, in the midst of all that splendor, an 8-year-old girl sat alone on a wooden swing, her glossy shoes brushing the grass beneath her. Her name was Lily Whitmore, daughter of Richard Whitmore, a billionaire tech mogul who built his empire brick by brick. But no tower of wealth could fill the emptiness Lily felt. Her nanny hovered distantly by the veranda, glued to her phone. Tutors came and went, but Lily always returned to the garden, a place where the world felt a little slower, a little quieter, a place where she could think. That was where she saw her, every afternoon like clockwork. A girl her own age, standing just beyond the gates, barefoot in torn jeans and a faded t-shirt 2 sizes too big. She never asked for food or money. She just watched. Her wide hazel eyes, alert and curious, seemed to absorb everything. Lily watched back, equally intrigued. It started with a wave. Then, a few days later, a wordless smile. Eventually, Lily gathered the courage to approach the gate. "Hi," she whispered one day, her small hand gripping the cold iron bars. The girl blinked in surprise but said nothing at first. Then slowly, "Hi." "What's your name?" Lily asked. "Maya." Lily's heart fluttered. Finally, she had someone her age to talk to, someone real, not hired to pretend interest. "Do you want to play?" she asked, pointing to the garden behind her. Maya glanced behind, at the street where her little belongings were hidden in a worn-out backpack. "I can't come in," she said, "but I can stay here." And so they did. Day after day, the girls talked. They giggled. They shared stories. Maya had a way of seeing the world that felt like magic. She spoke of stars she saw from rooftops, of finding warmth in forgotten alleys, of songs sung by heart and not learned from music teachers. Her stories weren't sad. They were alive. Lily, for the first time in her life, felt seen. But Richard Whitmore noticed a change. His daughter had stopped complaining. She asked strange questions. "Daddy, why don't we talk to people outside the gate? Or what do you think it feels like to sleep under the sky?" It unnerved him. So one afternoon, while pretending to take a business call, Richard watched from the upstairs window as Lily ran toward the gate with a drawing in her hand. And then he saw her, the girl, talking, laughing, gesturing with her hands like a storyteller. She wasn't begging. She wasn't sad. She was alive. He narrowed his eyes. Something was off. Something he didn't understand, and it unsettled him deeply. That evening, Richard sat in his sleek minimalist office, staring at the security footage he'd pulled up on his computer. He had instructed the head of security to review every moment Lily had spent near the gates in the last 2 weeks. As the footage played, he saw his daughter's eyes light up in a way they never did during piano recitals or horseback riding lessons. And the girl, this Maya, was animated, expressive, her hands moving like brushstrokes in the air as she spoke. He zoomed in. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled, but there was a strange grace in the way she carried herself, like someone untouched by fear or shame. She didn't act like a beggar. She wasn't after food or money. She was just present. Richard leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. Something about this interaction nagged at him. He had spent his entire life curating every inch of his world, his company, his home, his daughter's education. Everything was optimized, controlled, and yet here was a wild card, standing at his gates, changing something fundamental inside Lily without his permission. He decided to ask Lily directly. Over dinner that night, he casually brought it up as she pushed peas around her plate. "Who's the girl you've been talking to outside?" Lily looked up, blinking. She chewed her lip. "Her name's Maya. She's my friend." "Where is she from?" "She lives, I think, on the street." Richard set down his fork. "And what do you talk about with her?" Lily shrugged, then smiled. "Everything. She tells me stories, real ones, about places she's been, people she's met. She says everything has a story, even rocks and trees. Did you know that? He didn't answer. She taught me this game too, Lily continued. You close your eyes and listen really hard until you can hear the quietest thing around you. It's called listening to the still. Richard stared at his daughter, his heart tightening with a feeling he couldn't name. The next day he told his driver to circle the block slowly, and he waited inside the back seat, watching from behind tinted glass. Sure enough, just before 4 o'clock, Maya appeared. She walked like someone who belonged to the earth, not hurried, not uncertain. She paused by the gate, and when Lily saw her, she ran with open arms like she'd found a missing piece of herself. They talked for nearly an hour. No toys, no gadgets, just words and laughter. Then Maya took something out of her backpack, a piece of chalk. She drew on the sidewalk, a crooked heart, and inside it 2 stick figures holding hands. Lily clapped her hands in delight. Richard's chest ached, and he didn't know why. He had built a life with no room for unpredictability. But here was a girl, grimy, barefoot, teaching his daughter something no private school ever had, something that was starting to reach him too. The following morning, Richard made a decision he never thought he would. He walked out to the front gate alone, just after breakfast. He wore a pressed suit and an expression of controlled curiosity. The gardeners paused their trimming as he passed, and the staff watched from the windows in quiet surprise. Maya was already there, sitting cross-legged just beyond the iron bars, humming a tune and tossing pebbles in rhythm. She looked up when she saw him approach, and her body tensed, ready to run. "I'm Lily's father," Richard said gently, stopping a few feet from the gate. Maya stood slowly. "I know. You've been spending time with my daughter." "She asked me to," Maya replied, chin lifted, eyes steady. "I didn't force her." "I'm not accusing you," he said, though his tone was more clipped than he intended. He glanced down, unsure of how to proceed. "I've seen the way you talk to her, the things you say. They're different." Maya tilted her head. "Different how?" He hesitated. "You told her about listening to the still. You said everything has a story." "They do," Maya said simply. "No one ever taught her to listen." Something about that struck him. "And who taught you?" Maya looked up at the sky, as if the answer might float down with the clouds. "Life, I guess." Richard blinked, caught off guard by her sincerity. This girl wasn't performing. She wasn't manipulating. She was just speaking from a place of experience he had never known. "Where are your parents?" he asked. Her gaze dropped, and for a moment, the light in her eyes dimmed. "Gone." That one word hung between them like fog. Richard swallowed. "Do you have somewhere safe to sleep?" "I've got places," she said carefully. "People who look out for me sometimes." He nodded slowly, unsure what he was even trying to accomplish. He couldn't offer her shelter, at least not yet. That would be too disruptive. But walking away didn't feel right either. "Why do you come here?" he finally asked. Maya smiled faintly. "Because your daughter has a good heart. She listens. She doesn't judge. And sometimes it's nice to talk to someone who hasn't learned to look away yet." That last line hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at the small girl in front of him, feeling something shift inside, a door cracking open. "I'll be watching," he said at last, more to himself than to her. "I know," she replied. "You already are." He turned and walked back toward the house, unsure whether he was more unsettled by her presence or by how much she reminded him of something he'd long forgotten. That night, Richard found himself lying awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, the conversation with Maya looping in his mind. Her words clung to him. Not just what she'd said, but how she'd said it. That unshakable calm, that quiet wisdom, like she had lived 1,000 lives already. He rose before dawn and walked barefoot into the garden, the dew soaking his steps. He stood where Lily usually played and glanced toward the gate. It was still, silent. But the air felt different now, charged with something intangible. When Lily woke up and joined him hours later, she was surprised to see him there. "Daddy," "I couldn't sleep," he said. "You come out here a lot." "It's my favorite place," she replied. "Maya says it's like a listening room. She says if you sit long enough, the trees will tell you secrets." Richard knelt beside her. "What kind of secrets?" Lily smiled. "Like what people have forgotten, or what they're too busy to hear." He studied her, noticing how much her expression had changed over the last few weeks, less distracted, more thoughtful. "Do you believe her?" he asked. "I do," she said. "She's never lied to me." That stayed with him as the day wore on. Later, while passing through the kitchen, he paused beside the staff table where an untouched plate of food had been left. On impulse, he wrapped it up, placed it in a paper bag, and walked it out to the gate at sunset. Maya was there. She looked at the bag, then at him. "I don't need charity," she said calmly. "This isn't charity," Richard replied. "It's dinner, and maybe thanks." She accepted it without another word and sat cross-legged on the sidewalk, eating slowly. He remained standing, watching. For the first time, he didn't feel like the one in control. "You know," she said between bites, "your daughter is going to grow up into someone very important." Richard's eyebrows lifted. "She already is." Maya shook her head. "Not because of your money, because she knows how to feel." He looked away, heart tightening again. "I'm trying," he said softly. Maya didn't respond, but when she finished eating, she folded the bag neatly, stood, and said, "Then maybe one day she'll teach you too." He watched her walk off down the street, blending into the shadows, and felt a wave of something raw and unfamiliar rise in his chest. Later, he found Lily sketching again, another chalk drawing on the stone path. This time it was a tree with roots that touched a sleeping heart. He knelt beside her, his voice rough. "What does it mean?" She looked up. "That's you, Daddy. Maya says you forgot how to feel, but you're starting to remember." He felt the sting in his eyes before he could stop it. For the first time in years, Richard Whitmore felt tears coming, and he didn't wipe them away. The following week unfolded like a quiet awakening. Richard began spending more time outdoors, not to supervise, but simply to be. He would sit on the stone bench near the fountain while Lily and Maya spoke at the gate, listening without pretending to be busy. Sometimes he even brought his laptop out there, but he rarely touched it. Instead, he watched. He absorbed. Maya continued showing up like clockwork, never asking for anything, never lingering too long. She told stories from her past, of watching meteor showers from fire escapes, of collecting bottle caps like treasures, of a grandmother who used to hum lullabies while braiding her hair. There was always a lesson hidden in each tale, and Lily soaked them up like sunlight. One afternoon, Maya taught Lily how to build a tiny bird feeder from sticks, string, and an old bottle cap. They hung it on a branch just inside the fence. The next day, a robin visited. Lily squealed with delight, and Maya smiled, proud. Richard watched all of it with a strange ache in his chest, a feeling he couldn't name but couldn't ignore. That evening, during dinner, Lily reached across the table and placed her small hand on his. "Daddy, can Maya come inside sometime?" He froze. Inside. Into the world he'd spent decades controlling. The thought made his throat tighten. But when he looked into his daughter's eyes, he saw not innocence, but conviction. "She's never been in a real kitchen," Lily added. "She told me. She says she wants to learn how to cook spaghetti." Richard hesitated. His fingers tightened around the fork. He thought of the cameras, the staff, the way people would whisper if they knew. But then he remembered Maya's voice. She hasn't learned to look away yet. He leaned back, heart pounding. "We'll see," he said quietly. "Soon." That night, sleep wouldn't come. Around midnight, Richard walked into Lily's room to check on her. She was asleep, hugging a pillow. On her nightstand sat a drawing, two girls side by side, one with a golden crown, the other with bare feet, both smiling. Above them, a single word: same. He turned away, wiping his eyes. The next afternoon, Maya didn't show up. Richard waited by the gate. So did Lily. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Lily's smile faded. She sat on the ground, chalk in hand, but didn't draw. "She never misses," Lily whispered. Richard felt a growing unease settle in his stomach. He walked out the gate and down the sidewalk, eyes scanning the corners. Nothing. That night, Lily wouldn't eat. "She's gone," she whispered. "She left." But deep down, Richard knew something was wrong. Maya hadn't just walked away. Something had happened. And for the first time in years, Richard Whitmore felt fear. Not for his business or reputation, but for a little girl he barely knew, yet somehow couldn't imagine losing. The next morning, Richard called off all meetings. His assistant, stunned, asked if there had been a family emergency. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his coat and keys and drove through the city alone, retracing every corner near the estate. He asked street vendors, shopkeepers, even a woman sweeping a stoop if they had seen a barefoot girl with tangled hair, maybe carrying a backpack. Most shook their heads. One old man with clouded eyes said he remembered her. She sat near the flower stall 3 days ago, humming to herself. But that was it. No one had seen her since. By late afternoon, Richard pulled into a side alley off Fulton Street and parked. It was a rougher part of town. Graffiti on brick, dumpsters overflowing, the smell of old oil and something sour hanging in the air. He stepped out, ignoring the stares. For the first time in years, he felt exposed. He walked, calling her name quietly at first, then louder. "Maya." A teenager leaning against a brick wall with headphones looked up. "You looking for the chalk girl?" Richard's heart jumped. "Yes. You know her?" The teen nodded slowly. "She used to draw here. Sidewalk stuff, like stories. But she stopped coming 2 days ago." "Do you know where she might be?" "She never told anyone where she sleeps. But sometimes she went to the old rail yard when it rained." It had rained the night before. Richard thanked him and got back in the car, heading toward the abandoned rail yard 2 miles away. He parked outside the broken fence and stepped carefully over debris, heart racing. The silence here was different, heavy. Then he saw it, a tiny bundle of fabric near a rusted freight car. He rushed forward. It wasn't her, just a blanket and a few crumpled papers. But on the ground, drawn in smudged blue chalk, was the outline of a heart. Inside it, 2 stick figures. One wore a tie. The other had wild hair, his throat closed. "She was here," he whispered. A cough sounded behind him. He turned. Maya stood under the shadows of the freight car, holding her backpack tightly. Her eyes were tired, cheeks hollowed. "Maya," he breathed, stepping forward. She flinched. "I thought you left," he said. "Lily. She's been waiting." Maya looked down. "I got sick. Didn't want her to see." His gaze softened. "You should have come to us." "I'm not supposed to need help," she muttered. "You're a child," he said, voice thick. "You're allowed to need help." She looked up at him, uncertain, as if the world had never told her that before. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Not just concern, not just guilt. A bond. Fragile. Real. He reached out his hand. "Come home with me." Maya stared at Richard's outstretched hand for a long moment, her eyes flicking from his face to the weathered ground beneath her bare feet. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack, and for a second he thought she might bolt. But then slowly, cautiously, she reached out and placed her hand in his. It was small and cold, but it didn't tremble. They walked to the car in silence. Richard opened the door for her gently, like she was something fragile that might break if startled. She climbed in without a word, sinking into the leather seat, staring out the window with a dazed expression. He glanced at her once as he started the engine, noticing the pale flush on her cheeks and the way her lips pressed together, not out of fear, but habit. When they reached the estate, the staff gawked as Richard carried Maya inside himself. She was light as a feather, her body limp from exhaustion. Lily came running, her eyes wide, and threw her arms around Maya the moment Richard set her down on the plush sofa. "You're back," Lily cried, her voice cracking. "I thought you forgot me." "I didn't," Maya whispered hoarsely. "I could never." Lily burst into tears and clung tighter. Richard stepped back, giving them space, but his own chest ached watching the reunion. He hadn't realized how much he'd been holding his breath until now. That night, Richard had the guest suite prepared. Fresh sheets, warm clothes, soup simmering on the stove. Maya bathed and changed, emerging clean and timid, her wild hair combed back. She looked less like a stray and more like a child, just a child, vulnerable, human, and suddenly very real. During dinner, she barely spoke. Lily did most of the talking, filling the silence with tales of everything Maya had missed. A new bird at the feeder, a poem she wrote, a dream where the garden turned into a jungle. Afterward, as the girls played quietly on the rug with chalk and colored paper, Richard stood by the doorway, arms folded. His house felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a place that breathed. He turned to the head of household staff. "She stays here, indefinitely." "Of course, sir," the woman replied, nodding, though surprise flickered in her eyes. Later that evening, as Richard tucked Lily into bed, she asked softly, "Daddy, are you going to be her dad too?" The question stopped him cold. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'll protect her. That much I promise." When he checked on Maya one last time that night, she was curled under the covers in the guest room, one hand clutching the hem of the blanket like it might disappear. She opened her eyes when he stepped in. "You're not a stranger anymore," she whispered. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. "I hope not," he replied. Then, quietly, he shut the door. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost natural, though nothing about it was ordinary. Maya stayed. She ate meals at the long dining table, walked with Lily through the gardens, and even began learning to read with the help of Lily's old picture books. She was shy at first, quiet during mealtimes, and hesitant to touch anything too delicate or expensive. But gradually something softened in her. One morning, as Richard sipped coffee in the solarium, he overheard Maya and Lily in the library. Maya was trying to read aloud from a book about animals. Her voice wobbled, but Lily's encouragement never wavered. "You can do it," Lily said. "Just sound it out." "Pan, da," Maya tried. "Exactly," Lily squealed. "You're so good at this." Richard closed his eyes for a moment and smiled, something deep and warm filling the quiet space inside him. Later that afternoon, Maya stood beside him at the piano in the music room. She watched his fingers as he played a slow melody. "Do you want to try?" he asked. Maya hesitated, then nodded. He guided her hands gently, showing her how to press the keys. Her touch was light, uncertain, but the sound that followed was beautiful in its simplicity. "You're a fast learner," Richard said. Maya glanced up at him. "I remember sounds better than words." "Music is a kind of memory," he replied. "It stays in you." She didn't say anything, but she smiled, just barely. That evening, Richard received a call from his board of directors. He was expected at a press conference the next morning, something about a new merger, a photo op, the usual choreography. As he hung up, he looked out the window. The girls were drawing again on the stone path. Maya had chalk on her cheek, Lily was laughing with her whole body, and for the first time he didn't want to leave the house. But the next morning, duty called. He dressed in his sharpest suit, straightened his tie, and kissed Lily on the forehead before leaving. Maya stood near the staircase watching him. "Back tonight," he said. She nodded. "I'll be here." That sentence hit him unexpectedly hard. He returned late, after sunset. The house was quiet, the girls already in bed. But something was different. A heaviness hung in the air. He found the housekeeper in the kitchen. "Everything okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "There was a man at the gate this afternoon. He didn't give his name, just stared." He watched Maya and Lily play, then left before security reached him. Richard's stomach dropped. Did Maya see him? "Yes," she said softly. She froze, then ran inside. He clenched his jaw. Whoever that man was, he was coming back. Okay. The next morning, Richard sat in his office with the security team, reviewing footage from the previous day. The camera feed showed a tall, thin man in a dark hoodie standing just outside the estate gates. His posture was rigid, his head slightly tilted as he watched the two girls playing in the garden. When Maya noticed him, her body stiffened instantly. The footage caught her backing away slowly, then bolting toward the house without a word. Lily, confused, followed seconds later. The man didn't move, didn't call out. He simply watched. And then, almost as if satisfied, he turned and walked away. "Enhance the frame," Richard said. The tech zoomed in, pixel by pixel. The man's face remained mostly obscured by the hoodie's shadow, but there was something disturbingly familiar about the eyes. Richard felt his breath catch in his throat. "Double the guards at every post," he ordered. "Nobody comes near the gates unless they're cleared." "Yes, sir." After the team left, Richard went to Maya's room. She was curled up on the window seat, staring out at the horizon, arms wrapped tightly around her knees. He sat beside her. "Who was he?" She didn't speak. "Maya, you can tell me. Was he someone from before?" She nodded once. "His name is Eli. He used to take care of me. Kind of." Richard's jaw tensed. "What do you mean, kind of?" She looked down. "He found me when I first ran away. Said he'd protect me. But it wasn't like that. He made me do things. Not stealing or hurting, just small stuff. Distract people, smile, talk sweet. So he could take from them." Richard's stomach turned. "Did he hurt you?" "No," she whispered. "But he made me feel like I owed him, even when I didn't." Richard exhaled slowly, furious and helpless at once. "He's not coming near you again, I promise." She looked at him then, eyes full of something raw. "He doesn't like when people leave him. He finds them." Richard nodded, already calculating every possible measure of security he could deploy. "Well, this time he's not finding someone alone. He's finding me." That night, Richard moved Maya into a room next to Lily's and instructed security to keep eyes on both at all times. He barely slept. Every sound in the house made him rise. Every creak in the floor pulled his hand toward his phone. At dawn, Maya came into his study quietly, barefoot, her arms crossed. "You still want me here?" she asked. He turned to her, face tired but resolute. "More than ever." She looked unsure. "Even if someone like him is part of my story." He stood, walked to her and knelt, especially because of that. 3 days passed. Maya remained quiet but watchful, and Richard noticed her eyes often darting to the windows, her shoulders tense whenever the wind moved the curtains. Lily tried her best to keep the days light, pulling Maya into games, stories, and even their first cooking lesson, spaghetti, just like Maya had dreamed. Richard stayed home, cancelled meetings, rerouted calls. For the first time in his life, he chose people over business, heart over empire. Still, the shadow of the man lingered. On the 4th night, just after the house had gone to sleep, a silent alarm triggered on the west side of the estate. A motion sensor near the perimeter wall lit up red on the security console. Within seconds, Richard was out of bed and heading downstairs, robe over his clothes, phone in hand. The head of security met him at the foot of the stairs. "West wall." "Someone's trying to scale it." Richard's blood froze. "How long ago?" 30 seconds. "Show me." They opened the live feed. A figure, thin, hooded, was already halfway up the stone wall, using vines and footholds. He moved with eerie familiarity, like someone who'd done this before. Richard didn't wait. "Call the police and lock down the house." He bolted to Maya's room. She was already awake, sitting on the bed, hugging a pillow. When she saw his face, she knew. "It's him." "I've got security on him," Richard said, voice shaking. "He's not getting in." But Maya was trembling. "You don't understand. Eli doesn't give up. Ever." Outside, dogs barked. Flashlights danced across the yard. A voice shouted. Richard rushed to the control room just as guards apprehended the man. He was on the ground, hands behind his back, face pressed to the grass. Even from the monitor, Richard could see his eyes, cold, empty, smiling without warmth. "Let me talk to him," Richard said. "Sir, that's not protocol. Do it." Minutes later, Richard stood face to face with Eli in the holding area near the gatehouse. The man's hoodie was torn, revealing a long scar along his temple. He looked Richard up and down with a smirk. "So, this is the castle," Eli said. "Didn't think she'd crawl into something this rich." "You stay away from her," Richard said, voice like iron. "She's mine," Eli replied, voice calm, like stating the weather. "She owes me." "She owes you nothing." "She has something," Eli said. "A paper, a letter from before. It's worth something to someone, and she took it." Richard's heart raced. "What kind of letter?" Eli grinned, lips cracked. "You really don't know, do you? I know enough to protect her." Eli leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Then you better find that letter before someone else does." He was hauled away moments later, but the damage was done. Richard returned to Maya, more shaken than he let on. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Did he say anything?" Richard hesitated, then nodded. "Maya, what letter is he talking about?" She was silent, then her voice, barely audible. "I didn't think it mattered anymore." And with trembling hands, she reached into the lining of her backpack and pulled out a letter addressed to Richard Whitmore. Richard stared at the letter in Maya's small hands, the world narrowing into a tunnel of disbelief. His name, printed in faded ink, stared back at him. The envelope was worn, the edges curled and stained, but unmistakably real. He reached for it slowly, heart pounding. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. Maya looked down. "It was with my things, hidden in an old box. I never opened it. I couldn't read much back then, but I knew it had your name. Eli found it once, said it was valuable, so I kept it secret." Richard's fingers shook as he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and soft. The handwriting was delicate but rushed, written in pain or fear. He began to read. "To Richard Whitmore, if you're reading this, I am gone. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I was never brave enough to face you after what happened. Our daughter, her name is Maya. I named her after the spring light I used to see in your eyes. She is yours, Richard. Please, if by some miracle this letter reaches you, protect her. She deserves the world I couldn't give. Hannah." Time stopped. Richard's breath left him like a blow to the chest. He read the letter again, and again. The words blurred. Hannah, that name, the woman he loved years ago, the one who disappeared without warning, who he thought had left because she wanted nothing more to do with him. She hadn't run from him. She'd been hiding something, someone. Maya. He looked up at the little girl standing across from him, small, silent, unsure. His voice broke. "You're my daughter." Maya's lip trembled. "Is it true?" He crossed the room in 2 strides and fell to his knees in front of her. "I didn't know," he said, tears streaming. "I didn't know about you. If I had, God, Maya, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." Her eyes searched his, not for the words, but for the truth behind them. "Do you still want me?" she asked. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he would never let go again. More than anything. They stayed that way for what felt like forever. Time didn't matter. Only the heartbeat of that moment. When Lily appeared at the door, she blinked at the sight of them. "What's going on?" Richard reached out, pulling her close too. "You have a sister," he whispered. "You both have each other." Lily's eyes widened. She turned to Maya, then back to her father. "Really?" Maya nodded, uncertain but smiling through her tears. "Really?" The 3 of them sat on the floor, tangled in each other's arms. But as the warmth of reunion settled over them, Richard's mind began to race again. If Eli knew about this letter, who else did? and what danger still lurked in the shadows of a past finally uncovered. The following morning, the Whitmore estate felt different, lighter, warmer, yet humming with tension beneath the surface. Richard couldn't stop glancing at Maya, watching her movements with new eyes. She was still the same girl who had taught his daughter to listen to the wind and hear stories in the silence. But now she was something more. She was his daughter. He had a daughter, and he had missed 8 years of her life. As breakfast was served, Maya sat cautiously at the table. Lily, ever the heart of their tiny circle, sat beside her, whispering silly jokes and leaning her head on Maya's shoulder. The bond between them had only deepened since the revelation. Richard cleared his throat. "Maya, there's so much I need to understand about your mother, about what happened." Maya looked up. "I don't know much. She was kind, gentle, but scared all the time. We moved a lot. She never let anyone close." He listened, his heart aching with every word. "She got sick when I was 5. Really sick. One night she left and never came back. Eli said she wasn't coming back at all." Richard's jaw clenched. "And you ended up with him?" Maya nodded. "I didn't have anywhere else to go. He didn't hit me or anything, but he kept reminding me I was alone, that I was lucky to have him." Richard reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "You're not alone anymore, and you'll never be again." Later that day, he had the family attorney examine the letter. It was authenticated within hours. There were no legal hurdles, no one to contest Maya's identity. Hannah had passed away quietly in a public hospital under a different name. No records had been connected to Richard. It was all real, all tragic, and now his responsibility. But something still gnawed at him. He pulled the head of security aside. "I need to know more about Eli, his full name, his connections. I want to know if anyone else knew about Maya or about me." By evening, the report arrived. Eli Turner, no fixed address, prior arrests for theft and manipulation schemes, though he'd evaded serious charges for years. Recently, he'd been seen with a man named Carson Vale, a low-level information broker known for selling secrets to tabloids and corporate rivals. Richard's stomach turned. This wasn't just about Eli anymore. If Carson had gotten wind of Maya's identity, if a scandal broke, it would destroy more than just his reputation. It could endanger Maya. That night, Richard sat beside her as she read a children's book aloud. Her voice was steady now, stronger. He smiled, but the weight of what loomed outside their walls never left him. When she finished, she looked up. "Did I do okay?" "You did perfect," he said. But he didn't sleep that night, because the truth was out. And truth, he knew all too well, rarely stayed quiet for long. 2 days later, Richard received the first call, an unknown number. He let it go to voicemail, but the message chilled him to the bone. "I know who she is, Whitmore, and I know who her mother was. You want this to stay quiet? You'll talk to me." No name, just a gravelly voice that reeked of confidence. He played the message twice before forwarding it to security. Then he paced his office, mind racing. He wasn't afraid for himself. He'd handled blackmailers, hostile takeovers, smear campaigns. But this was different. This was about Maya, and he would not let her past be used as a weapon against her. He met with his legal team, preparing for any media fallout. At the same time, private investigators began tracking Carson Vale. The man had gone underground, but whispers suggested he had already reached out to a tabloid with a tantalizing pitch. The billionaire's secret daughter found in the streets. Richard felt sick. That night after dinner, Lily and Maya were in the garden. Richard stood at the window watching them. Maya laughed, really laughed, as Lily chased her through the grass with a foam sword. The sound of her joy echoed across the yard. And for the first time, Richard saw not just the girl she had been, or the daughter she was now, but the future she could have, if he protected it. He stepped outside, calling them both in. "We're going on a short trip tomorrow," he said. Lily blinked. "Where?" "Somewhere quiet. Safe." Maya's smile faltered. "Is someone coming for us?" Richard knelt before her. "They might try, but they won't reach you. I promise." The next morning they drove 3 hours to a private estate in the countryside, a place Richard had once used for retreats, now repurposed as a haven. A high fence surrounded the property. Trusted staff awaited them. For the first time in days, Maya seemed relaxed again. She explored the woods with Lily, collected smooth stones, and even waded into the creek barefoot, laughing when the cold water splashed her ankles. Richard stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets, watching them with a mix of awe and grief. So much of her childhood had been stolen, but what remained, he would fight for with everything he had. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Maya approached him by the old wooden swing. "Do you think she knew you would find me?" she asked softly. He looked down at her, then up at the sky. "I think she hoped I would become the kind of man who could." Maya leaned against him, resting her head on his side. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't speak. He just wrapped his arm around her and held her close, because tomorrow, he knew, the storm would come, and when it did, he would be ready. The storm arrived the very next morning. At 6:14 a.m., Richard's phone buzzed with a headline alert. "Billionaire Richard Whitmore allegedly fathered homeless child. Anonymous sources claim hidden daughter discovered." The article was thin on facts, but laced with insinuation. Phrases like unconfirmed paternity, mysterious letter, and child born from secret affair filled the paragraphs, each one designed to ignite public frenzy. By 8 a.m., it was on every major news feed. Cameras appeared outside the main Whitmore residence. Reporters circled like vultures. At the countryside estate, Richard sat in the study with his legal advisor and media strategist. Maya and Lily were still asleep. "We can push back legally," the strategist said, "but the story's out. That's only a matter of time before more details leak." Richard stared at the screen. They had used a photo, blurry but clearly Maya, taken near the estate gate weeks ago. "She's a child," he said, "an innocent child. And that's what we need to lean into," the strategist replied. "Show the world the truth before the tabloids distort it. You want to protect her, then make them see her." Richard looked down at the letter still in his coat pocket. Hannah's words, her plea. He'd failed to protect her. He wouldn't fail again. By noon, he released a public statement. It was personal, raw, unfiltered. He confirmed Maya's identity as his daughter. He explained how he had only recently discovered the truth. He condemned the exploitation of a child's life for sensational headlines and vowed to ensure Maya's safety and dignity above all else. And then he said something no one expected from a man like him. "Maya has taught me more about love, truth, and resilience in a few weeks than I've learned in a lifetime of building companies. She is not a scandal. She is a gift." The media reaction was swift, mixed. Some outlets lauded his transparency, others called it spin. But something in his words resonated. Parents shared his letter online, celebrities posted messages of support, and slowly the narrative began to shift. Inside the estate, Maya was quiet that day. She stayed in her room, curled in the window seat, her expression unreadable. Richard entered gently. "They know now," she said without turning. "They do. Are you mad?" He crossed the room, knelt beside her. "No, I'm proud." She looked at him then, scared, uncertain. "They'll say things. They already are. But I don't care. All that matters is you." He pulled her close, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, reporters scrambled for another headline. Inside, a family began to heal. And yet, somewhere out there, Carson Vale still moved unseen, watching, waiting, because while Richard had chosen truth, Carson dealt in secrets, and he wasn't done yet. 2 days after Richard's public statement, the dust began to settle. The headlines gradually shifted from scandal to redemption. News outlets published op-eds about fatherhood, forgiveness, and the resilience of children. The public surprisingly sided with Richard, with Maya. But Richard knew peace was temporary, And that night his fears were confirmed. He received a package, no return address. Inside, a USB drive and a single printed note. You chose truth. Let's see how far it goes. CV. Richard locked his office door, inserted the drive into his encrypted laptop, and opened the single file. It was a video. Grainy footage from a street camera. Maya, much younger, maybe 6 years old, being dragged by the arm across a sidewalk by Eli. She was screaming, no sound, but the violence was clear. Then a cut, another clip, this one darker, indoors. A man's voice, distorted, speaking off camera. Tell me who he is. Maya's tiny voice, trembling. I don't know his name. Another cut, her clutching a letter, crying. Richard slammed the laptop shut, nausea rising in his throat. The footage was years old. But someone, Carson, had it, had been saving it, and now he was dangling it like bait. He picked up the phone. Find him, he told his security lead, now. The next morning, Richard told Maya everything. She sat on the couch, pale, knees pulled to her chest. I never wanted anyone to see that, she whispered. You don't have to be ashamed, he said. You were a child. You were terrified. But they'll think I'm broken. He leaned forward, his voice breaking. You're not broken. You're brave. You survived what would have crushed most people, and I will never let anyone use that against you. Lily joined them, wrapping her arms around Maya. You're my sister. That's all that matters. Richard looked between them, his daughters, and something inside him hardened. He had spent years mastering the world of business, control, dominance. But this was something else. He was no longer protecting an image. He was protecting his family. By evening, his team had tracked Carson Vale to a motel 2 hours outside the city. Richard didn't call the police. He went himself. When he arrived, Carson was sitting outside, smoking, a laptop open beside him. Mr. Whitmore, Carson drawled, brave of you to come alone. I came to end this, Carson smiled. I don't want money. I want power. This story's bigger than you. It's about what happens when someone like you gets caught off guard. Richard's voice was calm, but steel ran through it. You're done. You want to leak that footage? Go ahead. But I'll make sure every network sees you for what you are, a predator who exploits children. You won't sell another secret again. Carson's smirk faded. Richard leaned in. You underestimated one thing. What's that? I'm not the man I was. I've changed because of her. He turned and walked away, his voice echoing in the quiet. You don't scare me anymore. Back at the estate, Maya was waiting. And when Richard returned, he knelt before her and whispered, He's gone. For the first time since her mother's death, Maya slept soundly, and Richard knew. The past no longer owned them. Spring arrived gently, as if the earth itself knew the Whitmore family needed healing. The garden bloomed in soft pastels, lavender, rose, golden daffodils. Birds returned to the feeders Maya had helped build, and the sound of laughter returned to the estate. Maya had changed. Not outwardly. She still wore her favorite worn hoodie and walked barefoot through the grass. But something inside her had settled. The fear that once lived behind her eyes had begun to fade. She smiled more, laughed louder, trusted deeper. Richard watched her with awe, each day learning something new. How she braided Lily's hair with wildflowers, how she always fed the smallest birds first, how she whispered stories to the trees like they were old friends. One afternoon, Lily tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, can we plant a tree, one for Mum? It was the first time she'd spoken of her mother in months. Richard knelt beside her. Of course we can. Would you like Maya to help? Lily grinned. She already picked the spot. They planted it beneath the old oak, the place where Maya had first stood outside the gates, watching. They chose a cherry blossom sapling. Maya dug the first hole. Lily watered the roots, and Richard pressed his hand into the soil beside theirs. Afterward, Maya stood back, her voice quiet. She used to love pink trees. She said they reminded her of soft beginnings. Richard turned to her. Your mother was right. They held a small ceremony, no press, no cameras, just family. And then came the school question. Maya had never been formally enrolled anywhere. She had taught herself numbers and words from street signs, menus and old newspapers, but now Richard wanted to give her more. "I don't want a fancy place," she said, clutching a catalogue he'd left on her desk. "I don't need uniforms and gold gates." Richard smiled. "You'll choose where you go. Together we'll find the right place." They visited 3 schools over the week, 2 public, 1 private. Maya was quiet during the tours, polite but distant. Nothing felt right. Then at a small community school tucked between an art studio and a bookstore, something changed. The moment they entered, Maya's eyes lit up. The walls were covered in student murals. The air smelled like paint and paper. Children sat in circles, reading aloud, some barefoot, some laughing freely. A teacher approached. "You must be Maya." She nodded slowly. "Well," the teacher smiled, "we've been saving a seat for you." After the tour, Maya turned to Richard outside. "This one," she said. "This feels like me." He nodded. "Then it's yours." Enrollment was swift. The faculty welcomed her with warmth, not pity. On her first day, Maya wore a second-hand backpack Lily had decorated with stars and birds. Richard drove her himself. As she stepped out of the car, she turned to him. "Will you still be here when I'm done?" "Always," he said. She smiled, then walked through the school gates, this time from the inside. Maya thrived in her new school, like a flower finally given sunlight. Her teachers called within the first week to say how quickly she'd adapted, how she listened intently, asked deep, unexpected questions, and helped shy classmates find their voices. She was still quiet, still guarded in some ways, but there was something magnetic about her presence, like she carried stories in her bones. At home, Lily waited every day by the window, counting minutes until her sister returned. The moment Maya stepped through the door, Lily would leap into her arms with a flurry of words. What the dogs did, what she drew, which bird had visited the feeder. Their bond had only grown stronger. They were no longer just playmates. They were sisters in every sense of the word. One rainy afternoon, Richard picked Maya up from school himself. She climbed into the front seat, her backpack soaked, but her face glowing. "Mr. Olson says I have a gift for storytelling," she said as she buckled in. "He's letting me write my own short story for class." "That's wonderful," Richard replied. "What's it about?" Maya looked out the window thinking. A girl with no shoes who teaches a bird how to fly, even though she can't fly herself. He smiled, but something caught in his throat. "Sounds like someone I know." Back at the estate, they found Lily in the study, flipping through a family photo album. Most of it was filled with Richard and baby Lily, smiling in staged professional shots. Maya approached the book slowly, eyes scanning the pages with quiet curiosity. "There's none of me in here," she said softly. Richard crouched beside her. "Not yet." The next day, he hired a photographer, not for a glossy magazine spread or a holiday card, but to capture the real them. Maya drawing chalk pictures on the garden path, Lily painting her face with chocolate. The girls curled on the couch reading a book. Richard caught between them, smiling like he hadn't in years. They printed the photos, filled an album, and titled it Day 1, A New Beginning. One evening, while tucking Maya into bed, Richard sat on the edge of her mattress, watching her trace her finger along the stars Lily had painted on the ceiling. "I still think about her sometimes," Maya whispered. "My mum. I wonder if she'd like it here." Richard gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "She would, especially the garden. She used to say, 'One day I'd live somewhere that felt like a story, like a place only kindness could build.'" He nodded, voice thick. "Then we'll keep building it. For you. For her." And for the first time, Maya reached out and wrapped her arms around him. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. In that silence, 1,000 broken pieces clicked back into place. And as Richard turned out the light, he felt it deep in his soul. They were no longer a house of 3 strangers. They were a home. Summer arrived with golden mornings and evenings warm enough to eat dinner under the stars. The Whitmore estate had transformed, not in architecture or landscape, but in energy. Laughter echoed more often. Doors stayed open longer. Joy, once rare and rationed, now flowed freely. One night, as the family sat around the fire pit roasting marshmallows, Lily asked, "Daddy, will Maya keep our last name now?" Maya looked up, eyes flicking to Richard, unsure. He smiled gently. "Only if she wants to." Maya stared into the fire. For a long time she didn't speak. Then she whispered, "I like how it sounds, when you say it." The next morning, Richard called his attorney. The paperwork to formally adopt Maya was already in process, but now she'd given her quiet permission. They scheduled the final hearing. When the day came, Maya wore a simple white dress and held Lily's hand as they walked into the courthouse. The judge smiled when he read the case. "You've been through a lot," he said softly, "but you're here now, that matters." When it was over and the gavel fell with a soft thud, Richard knelt beside her. "Welcome home, Maya Whitmore." She threw her arms around him before the applause had even started. Back at the estate, the staff threw a small celebration. Balloons, cupcakes, a banner that read, "Welcome home, Maya." For the first time she let herself dance, not wildly, not for show, but gently, barefoot in the grass, her arms open like wings. Later that evening she sat with Richard on the veranda, watching the fireflies blink across the darkened garden. "I feel different," she said. "How so?" "Like I'm part of something, not just watching through the fence." He reached over and held her hand. "That fence is gone now for good." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can we go see where she's buried?" Richard turned to her. "Your mother?" She nodded. "I want her to know that I'm okay, that I found you." A week later they drove to the city hospital where Hannah had passed. With the help of old records and a kind-hearted nurse, they found the cemetery, a small grave, unmarked. Maya knelt beside it, placed a drawing on the grass, 2 girls holding hands, a tree blooming behind them, and a tall figure watching with a smile. "She would have liked you," Maya said. "You were her only real story." Richard knelt beside her. "She gave me you. That's more than a story. That's a gift." They stayed there until the sun dipped low, the sky turning rose and lavender, and when they finally stood, Maya whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." Then she turned and walked toward the car, with her father at her side. The drive home from the cemetery was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. Maya stared out the window, her expression calm, even peaceful. As the city lights faded behind them, she leaned her head against the glass and whispered, "It doesn't hurt as much now." Richard glanced over. That's what healing feels like. Back at the estate, Lily had waited up, even past her usual bedtime. When Maya walked through the front door, Lily ran into her arms. "Was it beautiful?" "It was simple," Maya said, "but it felt like something closed, like a circle." That night, the sisters slept in the same room, their beds pushed together like 2 islands finally connected. The following week brought unexpected news. Richard's company, once on the verge of another major expansion, had voted to delay the rollout indefinitely. Board members cited Richard's sudden retreat from leadership as a concern. Whispers of succession planning began, but Richard didn't panic. He sat in the sunroom with Maya and Lily, playing card games, listening to Maya recite chapters from her school story. He didn't mention the board, the delays, or the quiet implosion of his empire, because something in him had shifted. His empire used to be everything. Now it was just a building. His family was the foundation. Still, he knew he couldn't ignore the reality forever. One evening after dinner, he gathered the girls in the living room. "I might need to go back to the city more often soon," he said gently, "to fix a few things." Maya looked up. "Are we coming with you?" "Not always. Sometimes it'll just be a day trip. Other times you'll stay here with Lily and Marta." Maya nodded slowly. Just don't forget us while you're fixing everything. Richard reached for her hand. You're the reason I'm fixing anything at all. The next day, he returned to the company's headquarters, but he wasn't the same man they remembered. He walked into the boardroom, stood at the head of the table, and told them exactly what he had learned. That girl you saw in the news, that's my daughter, and because of her, I've learned something none of you taught me, how to lead with heart. There was silence. Then a slow, respectful nod from one of the older members. He didn't regain full control of the company that day, but he didn't need to. He had planted a seed, just like the cherry tree in the garden. Back at home, Maya returned to her story. It was nearly finished. She titled it The Girl Behind the Fence. When she turned in the final draft, her teacher called Richard that afternoon. She has a gift, the teacher said. You should be proud. I am, Richard said. More than I ever thought possible. Later that night, Maya stood under the stars with Lily, pointing out constellations. Which one's your favorite? Lily asked. That one, Maya said, pointing. It doesn't shine the brightest, but it never disappears. And neither, Richard thought, would she. Late that summer on a Sunday evening painted in soft orange skies, Richard organized a small gathering at the estate. A quiet celebration, not for business, not for press, but for family. Close friends, trusted staff, Maya's teachers, even a few of the neighborhood children were invited. There were paper lanterns strung across the garden, music from a live string trio, and tables filled with food Maya and Lily had helped select. But the real centerpiece stood near the old oak tree, a tall easel with a canvas covered in cloth. As the sun dipped lower, Richard stepped forward with Maya and Lily beside him. He tapped a glass gently for quiet. Not long ago, he began, this garden was just a place of silence. Beautiful, yes, but empty in a way I didn't even recognize. Then one day, a little girl stood outside those gates and changed everything. He glanced down at Maya, whose hand was tucked inside his. She brought stories. She brought light. And she reminded me what it means to live. To feel. Maya's cheeks flushed pink, but she didn't look away. Richard reached up and pulled the cloth from the canvas, revealing a painting, an exact recreation of Maya's first chalk drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands inside a heart. But now, they had faces. One was clearly Lily, the other, Maya. Behind them stood Richard, his hand on their shoulders, a tree blooming behind them. Gasps echoed through the crowd. This is our story now, Richard said. A story of second chances, of fences lowered, of love found. He turned to Maya. You've taught me more than all my years in boardrooms ever could. Maya stepped forward. I just wanted someone to see me, not look past me. You were never invisible, Richard said. I just hadn't learned how to see. Applause rippled through the garden, but it wasn't loud. It was warm, intimate. That night, as the guests departed and the lanterns swayed in the breeze, Maya sat on the swing beneath the cherry tree, now in full bloom. Richard approached, carrying a blanket. Tired? He asked. She shook her head. Just thinking. About what? About how everything can change, from just one hello. He sat beside her. I used to think I was a mistake, she said, like I wasn't supposed to happen. He looked at her, emotion caught in his throat. You're not a mistake, he said. You're the reason I finally became the man I should have been all along. Maya rested her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you saw me, she whispered. I always will, he promised. The wind stirred the branches above them, petals drifting like soft snow around their feet. And somewhere in the dark beyond the gates, where fences once kept the world away, a new chapter had already begun. Autumn crept in with golden leaves and crisp mornings, transforming the Whitmore estate into a palette of amber and rust. The cherry blossom tree that Maya, Lily, and Richard had planted months ago stood tall now, its roots anchored, its branches swaying in the cool breeze like a quiet sentinel of everything they had overcome. Maya was thriving in school. She had made friends, real friends, who didn't care about her past, only about the girl who told the best stories and listened like every word mattered. She had even joined a storytelling club, where students met weekly to read aloud their work and give feedback. Her teacher, Miss Alder, had pulled Richard aside one day after school. "She has something rare," she'd said. "Not just talent, purpose." Richard beamed with pride. She found her voice. At home, Maya had claimed her space in the house. Her bedroom walls were now filled with her own artwork, ink sketches, soft watercolors, lines of poetry scribbled in cursive along the edges. The room that had once been a guest suite was now a vibrant reflection of the girl who used to sleep on concrete. Richard often found himself lingering at her doorway, just watching. He still had days when the guilt crept in, memories of all the years they'd missed. But Maya never blamed him. She understood in ways he didn't think a child could. One Sunday morning, over breakfast, Lily asked if they could all visit the farmer's market together. "They have a bookstall," she said. "Maya might find a story she doesn't already know." They went as a family. No cameras, no bodyguards. Just a father and his daughters walking hand in hand down a market lane, stopping for apples, cinnamon buns, and a second-hand novel that Maya hugged like treasure. It was a perfect day, until they returned home and found a letter waiting by the front door. No postage, no name. Just one sentence typed in block letters. "The world forgives rich men who lie, but not the truth they bury." Richard froze. Maya reached for the envelope, but he stopped her. "Inside. Now." He handed the note to security. No fingerprints, no cameras had caught the drop. Whoever left it had slipped in and out without a trace. That night, after Lily was asleep, Maya stood beside Richard in his office. "Do you think it's Carson?" she asked quietly. Richard shook his head. "He's gone underground. This feels different. Less about scandal, more personal." Maya was quiet for a moment. "There's something I didn't tell you." He turned to her slowly. "What is it?" Her voice shook. "Eli used to talk about someone, a woman. He said she paid him once to keep me out of sight." Richard stiffened. "A woman? She never came around, but he said she had red shoes. That's all I remember." Richard's thoughts spiraled. A woman? Red shoes? A payment to keep Maya hidden? Someone else had known. Someone had chosen silence. And now, they were stirring. The next morning, Richard sat in his office long before sunrise, flipping through old records, contacts, emails, anything that might reveal a clue. Red shoes, a woman, a payment, someone who had known about Maya and actively kept her from him. That single phrase repeated in his mind like a warning bell. The truth they bury. He pulled up financial audits from the year Hannah disappeared. And there it was, an unflagged, unsuspicious payout from one of his discretionary accounts. Their large cash withdrawal, issued through an assistant at the time, Veronica Hale. His heart dropped. Veronica had been with the company for nearly 15 years, trusted, efficient, loyal to a fault. She had been more than just an employee. She had helped raise Lily after his wife's passing. She was family. He hadn't spoken to her in nearly a year since she'd retired suddenly without warning. Red shoes. Veronica always wore them. He made the call. "Mr. Whitmore?" Her voice came over the line, wary. "I need to see you now." She paused. "You found the letter." "I found more than that." An hour later, Veronica arrived at the estate. She looked older, smaller somehow, but when she stepped into his study, her eyes were sharp with the same calculating calm he remembered. "I assume this isn't a social visit," she said. Richard motioned to the chair. "Sit." She did, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Did you know about Maya?" he asked. She didn't deny it. "I did." His fists clenched. "Why?" Veronica sighed. "Because I thought I was protecting you. After Hannah left, she reached out. She was scared, sick, angry. She didn't want you to know about the child." "You had no right." "I know," she said. "But you were unraveling back then, grieving, drinking. If I had dropped a daughter in your lap..." Richard stood, pacing. "You don't get to rewrite my life." She begged me not to tell you, and I didn't. I arranged for Hannah to receive funds quietly, with no trail leading back to you. I made sure Eli kept his distance, paid him off, threatened him when I had to. But then Hannah died, and I didn't know what to do. You let her grow up on the streets, Richard said, voice cracking. You let her believe no one wanted her. I tried to track her, Veronica said, but she vanished. Eli was slippery and I... No, Richard cut in. You made a decision for me, for her. You took away her right to be found. Veronica's eyes welled up. I'm sorry. It's not enough. Maya stepped into the room then, drawn by the raised voices. She looked at Veronica, then at her father. Is she the woman? She asked softly. Richard turned to her, breath shallow. Yes. Maya stared at Veronica for a long, painful second. I don't hate you, she said. But you took something from me. Veronica nodded, tears spilling. I know. Maya stepped back. Don't come here again. And just like that, the woman who had once been a trusted part of their lives walked out the door, leaving behind only silence and shattered trust. The days that followed Veronica's confession were strangely quiet. The air in the Whitmore estate felt heavier, as if a storm had passed, but the ground was still soaked from the damage. Richard moved through the house with a different kind of weight now, not guilt, but reflection. The realization that a part of his daughter's suffering had come not from fate or tragedy, but from a choice made by someone he trusted, cut deeper than he expected. Maya, too, was quieter. She still smiled. She still helped Lily with puzzles, still went to school, still drew on the garden path. But there was something in her eyes now, an edge of understanding that no child should carry. One evening, Richard found her in the garden, sitting under the cherry blossom tree with her notebook open. Writing? He asked gently. She nodded. A new story. About? She looked up. About a girl who learns that sometimes people hide the truth not to hurt you, but because they're afraid of what it means. He sat beside her on the cool stone path. I wish I could change what happened, he said. I don't, Maya replied. If even one thing was different, I might never have found you, or Lily, or this. She turned to him. But I don't want any more secrets. There won't be. That night, Richard went through every document, every file from the years Maya had been missing. He wanted to ensure no other secrets were lurking. That's when he found it, a voicemail from Hannah, dated 2 months before her death. It had been buried in an old server archive. He played it, heart racing. Richard, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I'm sorry I ran. I was scared. Of you, of the world, of myself. But Maya, she's beautiful. She's got your eyes, your stubborn heart. If anything happens to me and someone gives you this, please find her, love her, I know you will. His hands trembled. The next morning, he played the message for Maya. She didn't cry. She listened, eyes closed, soaking up every syllable. She loved you, Richard said, even when she was scared, especially then. Maya smiled faintly. I know. I can feel it now. Later that day, Maya read her story aloud at school. It was called The Garden Beyond the Gate. When she finished, the room was silent. Then came applause. Her teacher had tears in her eyes. That night, Richard received a call. A publisher had read a copy of Maya's story through the school's writing initiative. They wanted to meet her. He told her over dinner. Maya blinked in disbelief. Me? Like, really? Really, Richard said. They want to hear more. And in her eyes, for the first time, there was no trace of the girl who once stood outside the gate in torn clothes and silence. Only light, only story, only hope. The meeting with the publisher was set for a sunny Saturday in the city. Richard insisted on accompanying Maya, not just as her father, but as her biggest fan. Maya wore a simple dress and carried a folder of her stories, her hands trembling with excitement and nerves. As they entered the tall building, she whispered, "What if they don't like it?" Richard knelt beside her. "Then they're missing something beautiful." but I don't think they will. The meeting took place in a bright, book-filled office. The editor, a warm woman named Clara, welcomed them with tea and genuine curiosity. "Maya," she said, "your voice is rare. It's honest, poetic, and deeply human. We don't see that often. Not from adults, and certainly not from someone your age." Maya's eyes widened. "You really liked it?" "I loved it," Clara replied, "and I'd like to publish it. As a children's novella, if that's something you'd be open to." Maya looked at Richard. "Can I?" He smiled, eyes shining. "Absolutely." The contract came a week later. Maya's name would be on the cover, alongside a dedication she insisted on writing herself. "To the girl I was, and to every child still waiting at the gate, your story matters." News of the publication spread slowly at first. Then a well-known author tweeted about it. Then a morning show picked it up. Soon, Maya's name was being spoken not with pity, but with awe. Reporters reached out again, but this time they were met not with silence or scandal, but with a new narrative. One of resilience, of family, of truth. Richard scheduled an interview, just one, with a journalist he trusted. They filmed it in the garden, under the cherry blossom tree. Maya spoke with clarity beyond her years, her voice steady. "I thought I was invisible," she said, "but I learned I was just unseen. Now I'm not afraid of being seen anymore." The interview aired 2 days later and became a viral moment, not because it was flashy, but because it was real, authentic, healing. That evening, Richard received a handwritten letter from a young girl in foster care. It read, "I saw Maya on TV. I feel like her. I didn't know someone like me could have a story worth telling." He showed it to Maya. She read it twice, then hugged him tightly. "This is why I wrote it." And that night, in the quiet of the estate, while Lily slept and the wind danced through the trees, Maya opened her window and whispered to the sky, "Thank you." Not just to her mother, not just to fate, but to the version of herself that never stopped hoping someone would listen, because now they were. Winter returned softly, blanketing the estate in silver and silence. The cherry tree, though bare of blossoms, stood proud and rooted, just like Maya. Her book, The Garden Beyond the Gate, was now a national bestseller, translated into multiple languages and used in school curricula to teach empathy and resilience. But Maya hadn't changed. Fame touched her gently, but it never pulled her away from who she was. She still walked barefoot in the garden. She still sat under the trees to write, still helped Lily with schoolwork, still whispered to the birds like they were old friends. One evening, a week before Christmas, Richard gathered the girls in the living room. "I have something for both of you," he said, handing them each a small wrapped box. They opened them slowly. Inside Maya's was a locket. On one side, a picture of Hannah. On the other, one of Richard, Lily, and Maya together, laughing under the cherry tree. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She held it close. Inside Lily's box was a key on a delicate chain. "What's it for?" she asked. Richard smiled. "For your room, your stories, your voice. You both belong here forever." The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow began to fall. Later that night, as Richard tucked Maya into bed, she reached for his hand. "Do you think she sees us?" she asked, voice small. He looked out the window. "I think she sees everything, and I think she's proud." Maya nodded, her thumb brushing over the locket. "Then I'll keep writing, for her, for me, for anyone still standing outside the gate." He kissed her forehead. "You've already opened it." As he turned to leave, Maya whispered, "Daddy?" He paused. "Thank you for choosing me." He turned back, his voice full. "You weren't a choice, Maya. You were always meant to be found." And with those words, the last crack in her heart began to close. Because now she knew. She wasn't just a girl who'd been lost and found. She was loved. She was seen. She was home.